Hello, everyone. Welcome to Arkansas Alive. I want to personally thank you for joining me for today's edition of Arkansas Alive. Our topic this week is finish your course. This is tantamount if you're a person of faith. If you're a believer, if you're a Christian, and you understand that you have an assignment. You have a personal assignment to be a reconciler of people that are not saved. Introduce them to God, witness. If you're in the ministry or if you're in a church congregation, you have a corporate assignment, whatever the Lord has called you to do. But it's very important that everybody understand what it means to finish your course. Don't give up, don't quit, don't abandon your assignment. So that's what we're going to talk about this week. Stay tuned. Arkansas Live starts right now. And as we always, I say always, we don't always, but in many cases on Mondays, I like to give commentary. And when, everybody heard of and saw the mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas, my heart goes out to those people. I've been in Uvalde. I know right where it is. And we hurt for families who've lost loved ones senselessly. And, of course, you'll always hear the same dialogue. I'm not making fun of it. I'm just saying it's a form of insanity when they talk about the same things, but they don't ever do anything about it. There are solutions, and there are ways to stop this kind of murder. And yet, the politicians vacillate back and forth, gun control, no gun control, Second Amendment rights, whatever. It's really frustrating, and it makes people mad, and that's why you see some of the hostility because children are being killed. They're innocent, and they're being killed for no reason. And they run all the background checks, and, there's no history of violence or there's no history of arrests, etc. The young man that bought the guns bought them legally. The background checks checked out, whatever. And so you ask yourself, why? And, of course, they investigate, and over they find little incidences like a teacher propped the door open and left the door. It was supposed to be locked. The police did not aggressively pursue the shooter. They're in trouble, and so forth. And, people argue back and forth. Well, it's not the guns that kill people. It's people that kill people. Yeah, they use guns. And, there's an effort to rid the market of assault weapons. And really, truly, and I'm not wanting to offend or step on anybody's toes or take sides, but there's really no need for the average person to have an assault rifle. I mean, those were made for military, for war. You don't use them to hunt with. If you ban those things, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. However, you could take all the guns, which the Constitution forbids that, but you could take all the guns off the market, out of the shelves, off the websites, out of the gun shows, whatever. And people that are demon-possessed, mentally oppressed, they're going to find a way to steal, kill, and destroy some way. When the Arkansas State Police moved into their new headquarters out on 65th Street, Colonel John Bailey was the director of the state police at that time. He's a friend of mine. He's retired, but at that time he was a member of our church, taught in our Bible school, principal fellow. And he built that, and he asked me and if I would do the invocation, the dedication, and Governor Huckabee at that time. So we did. I got there a little early, and John said, "Come, let me show you what we've done here in this new state police headquarters." He had provided Bibles for inmates because they incarcerated some people in that facility, still do. He said, "Let me show you our gun closet." I said, "Okay, that'll be interesting." Took me to this closet, big closet about the size of this studio. It was full of weapons, rifles, machine guns, knives, swords, pistols. Some of them were makeshift. They're homemade. Their guns are steel pipes with a hammer and a nail. I mean, anything that would maim or kill. And he said, I want you to look at all this. And of course, when they get them from gang members and felons and so forth, I have one, he gave me one that was on a plaque. And they cut them in half. They sent them to a metal shop and they cut the rifle or the pistol in half. And then they mount it. And what he told me was, he said, this is all of the hardware that's out there in the culture that we confiscate when we arrest somebody or bust a gang or do this or do that. And I'm thinking to myself, and he said, guns are not a problem to get. You can get guns anywhere. If you can't find them or buy them, you steal them, people breaking houses. If you want to kill somebody and you want to use a gun to do it, you're going to do it. Whether there's a law against it or a ban on that particular model, you can get a gun and shoot somebody if you really are disposed that way. So you've got to go further than the political, constitutional. You've got to go further than that to pinpoint what's happening and why. That's what I'd like to do today in commentary. Go with me over to John's Gospel, and let's look at chapter 8 and verse 44. John chapter 8 and verse 44. And listen to the words that Jesus spoke. He's talking to Abraham's Abraham's descendants. And he said, you are of your father, the devil, and the lusts of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning and abode not in the truth. Now, right there you establish where the spirit of murder comes from. Have you ever thought how incensed we get? And this is a contrast, again, not meant to lessen the severity of the shootings in Uvalde or offend anybody. But have you ever thought in comparison, we are outraged when some lone shooter goes into a school and kills 21 people. And we should be outraged. It's not necessary. Shouldn't have happened. But we're not outraged when doctors in abortion clinics killed over 60 million babies in the womb. Now I want to show you our focus. Our balance is off. We're outraged when somebody shoots a child through a drive-by shooting, a gang initiation shooting, whatever. We're outraged when that takes place. But we're not outraged when every day little babies are in their mother's womb and are killed by a doctor performing an abortion, thrown in the trash, disposed of, incinerated. Our priorities have gotten warped. And of course, that's what Mother Teresa said. She said, any nation that kills its unborn loses its soul. Ronald Reagan wrote a book in 82, I think, and said, abortion, the conscience of a nation. Any nation that kills its unborn loses its conscience. So we've got things all squirreled up and distorted. And we need to go to the Scriptures. Always go to the Scriptures. And you'll find the answer for everything that goes on. And of course, the activists, the psychiatrists, everybody, law enforcement, all the people are going to analyze this thing. And they're going to find out this young man was a troubled youth. He was a loner. He was made fun of. All of those are symptoms of our culture, our society. You probably know kids yourself, or maybe you were the kid that people shunned, made fun of, excluded from their group. And you know how that can hurt and turn a person inward. And of course, if they go online to find relief, they're going to find more demonic substance. So let's look at the Scriptures and find out, where does this murder come from? It comes from Satan. Jesus said he was a murderer from the beginning. So everything that happens like that, from now on, you need to know that was Satan behind that. That was the devil behind that. Because people throw up their hands. Oh, why did this happen? Oh, God, why did you let this happen? Blah, blah, blah. And even the parents and the spouses of those that were killed are grief-stricken. And they don't understand. And you can't understand in your natural mind why a little child, innocent, in grade school would be shot and killed by some mentally disturbed individual. And there's no way that you can police the whole world and single out all of these people. Now, if you know somebody's thinking of doing something like this, a terroristic act, suicide, you certainly should report them and try to help them. But there's no way that you can totally control every human being's appetites, attitudes, etc. So you have to deal with the source. The source is Satan. He is a murderer. Jesus said he was a murderer from the beginning. Now, there's a difference between killing people in war and murdering people in cold blood. I know a lot of conscientious objectors that have had problems with going to war and serving the country in the military because they quote the Bible, thou shalt not kill. But that's not talking about murder. You'll find in the Bible, God told prophets to kill all of the prophets of Baal. I mean, when you're an enemy of God, you got a target on your back. You can either repent or get, how would you call it, exterminated. So we're talking about identifying the source here. If you go over to Ephesians 6:12, it tells you again the source of these type things and what to do about it. Unfortunately, too few Christians know the Bible. They don't know what to do. They don't know who their enemy is, and they don't know what to do to stop their enemy. I've shared with you before how I was invited, this was several years ago, to attend a strategic leadership conference seminar at the U.S. Army War College in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I was invited as a CEO. They wanted to, the U.S. Army War College wanted to pick our brain as to how we run our corporations or organizations or whatever. And then they shared with us how they ran the military. So the first day, after we checked in the barracks, and first day we went on the battlefield, Gettysburg, and it's just like it was in the 1800s. They've kept it that way on purpose so they can teach strategy. And we walked the battlefield just like the Confederates did at the Battle of Gettysburg, and they kind of walked arm in arm, an arm's distance apart from each other. It was a line. And of course the Union Army, they did not know, had refortified, and they had a new commander, and they were on Cemetery Ridge, and they just mowed them down, shot them down as they were marching. That was the style of warfare back then. And the second day we spent in the war rooms where the officers, the colonels, the majors would teach us strategic leadership or strategic war. And of course there were several books we had to read. I had to read one called Killer Angels. I had already read Sun Tzu's book on military strategy, The Art of War. This is a Chinese military historian. And the first thing that Sun Tzu says in his book, The Art of War, is you must know your enemy. Did you get it? You must know your enemy. George Patton proved this out. I have all the leadership books of Patton, Lincoln, Churchill, Roosevelt, etc. Patton was big on this. Of course, he graduated from the War College, and he was one of our finest generals, even though he was personally, he was a scallywag, and Eisenhower took him off the front and brought him home and put him behind the desk. He was humiliated by it, but Patton always studied his enemy. He knew his enemy. He read his books. He knew what he would do, when he would do it, and how he would do it. Well, that's what Sun Tzu says is the first item on the agenda in the art of war. You have to know your enemy. And the Bible confirms that. You have to know your enemy. You have to know who your enemy is. You have to know how he operates. The Bible tells us that we should give the devil no place. It says that he is a murderer from the beginning. He's a liar from the beginning. You have to know your enemy. All right, listen to what he says is the remedy for this. Verse 10, Ephesians 6. Ephesians 6, verse 10. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord in the power of His might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles and the schemes of the devil. Parents, you should pray over your children every day, especially if they're going to school. Put on the armor of God. Lay hands on them. Place your hands on them and confess the word. Heavenly Father, I put the armor of God over my child. I put on the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness. Their feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. I bind demon spirits, bind wicked spirits. You should pray over your children. Pray over them at home. Let them know why you're praying for them. Let them know that they need to be alert and aware of things around them. When I was a little boy growing up, my mother and father took the time. Of course, we weren't dealing with school shootings back then. I mean, dear Lord, we didn't even lock our doors. You didn't have the crime problem that you have today. You didn't have the drug problem. You didn't have television. You didn't have social media, none of those things. But they would always instruct me and my sister not to ever follow a stranger, not to ever get in a car with somebody we did not know. All these little common sense things. Look both ways before you cross the street. The police are there for your good. We were taught those things as little children, and it was reinforced in our public schools and in our Sunday school at church. But notice, let's go back here. He said, put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. The devil is not going away. Well, he's going to wind up in the lake of fire, forever be tormented. But in this culture that we live in, he's not going away. So you have to know your enemy, know who he is, and you have to stand against the wiles of the devil. That's your responsibility. That's what you have to do. You have to stand against the wiles, the schemes of the enemy. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood. People are not our enemies. Did you get it? People are not our enemies. And you might be thinking, oh, people are basically good. No, they're not. Not according to the Bible. The Bible plainly teaches us that people are actually born into sin because they carry the Adamic nature, the carnal nature, the fallen nature of man. That's why we have to get our kids saved at an early age, get them born again, and then they take on the new nature of Christ. But people are not basically good. They're basically bad. God said it regretted him in his heart that he'd made man because the thoughts of his heart were always evil continually. Now that's Old Testament. That's before Christ. But with Christ, we can get our kids born again. You should make that a priority in your life. Never too young to talk to them about Jesus. So he said, you're not wrestling against flesh and blood. People are not your enemies. So it's not going to do any good to raise your blood pressure and scream and holler and fight and devour. That won't solve anything. That's a reaction of the human nature, the fallen nature. You got to go past that and get into your spirit, into your heart. And you must forgive. I know that's almost blasphemous to some people. Say, well, that wasn't your child that was shot, blah, blah, blah. But it's still a biblical principle. Remember the church, the African-American church in South Carolina several years ago, and the white guy shooter, he went in there and killed a bunch of people. That congregation made it a point and went on camera and forgave the shooter. Now, you can't do that if you're not born again. If you don't have the love of God in you, you can't do that. If you're going to hold fast to an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, vengeance, then you're never going to have any peace, and you're always going to be upset about everything. I'm not saying that it's right for these people to do what they're doing. I'm not saying they're not evil. I'm saying you're not wrestling against them. People are not your enemies. He said you're wrestling against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. And certainly murder, terrorism, all of those things come under the dark areas of this world. Gambling, pornography, all of the ills in our society, the alcoholism, the drug addiction, all of these things are under an umbrella of darkness. And of course, we as a people, because of the fallen nature of man, we look at casinos and horse racing and all of these things as recreation, entertainment. But they're really under the cover of spirits of darkness. You need to know the mob is not dead. The mob is alive and well, and they're the ones that are profiting. You got profiteers, you got business people. You've even got radio and TV personalities that are profiting from some of these dark areas. They've invested in marijuana growing. They have invested in these activities. They're making money off of this. And it's hard to talk out of both sides of your mouth. James says you're double-minded, your faith won't work. So you can't feed the dark areas of anxiety, murder, rape, robbery, gangs. You can't feed the lawlessness and then, have a community-wide picnic and expect to solve all of the crime problems and drug problems and gang problems. You have to realize what you're dealing with. You have to teach them the Word. You have to preach the Word to them. So he said, you're not wrestling against flesh and blood, but against powers. Those are magistrates, judicial. Against the rulers of darkness of this world. There is a ruler, a spiritual ruler over gambling, over pornography, over drugs, over alcohol. There is a demon power that's over these areas of darkness. Against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places or heavenly places. So there's spiritual wickedness. Years ago, there was a man that wrote a book called Placebo. I almost could remember his name. But anyway, he came to see us. My wife and I were pastoring the church, and he came to see us. He'd written this book, and we had read it. We'd used it in teaching and educating people. And he was a deacon in a Baptist church, and yet God had taken him on a trip. He had a spiritual experience, and the angels took him to heaven, took him through the heavenlies into the third heaven. And he told about this in his book. And he said while the angel was taking him through the atmosphere, he said he saw all the demon spirits that were over these different regions. And the angels would point them out to him and said, this demon here and these demon groups are over this area of sin and degradation and murder, rape, and robbery, whatever. And then as he was being shown all of the areas that Satan's demons had authority over, he said to the angel, he said, well, where are the sexual perverted demons? And he said, they're not with the other demons. Now get this. He said the sexually perverted demons are so filthy, they're not allowed to associate with the other demons. Howard Pittman, that was his name. Howard Pittman, thank you. He's the one that wrote the book Placebo. And he's a normal-looking guy, came walking in the office with, almost overalls and a tractor hat. That's... But he knew he'd had an experience with God. And the angel told him that the perverted demons, the homosexuals, the lesbian, the transgender, all of the XYZ, whatever, demonic forces that were perverted, in their sexual appetites. He said they're not allowed to fellowship with the others because they're so filthy. The other demons won't have anything to do with them. Are you kidding me? The demons wouldn't have anything to do with these perverted demons because they were so filthy? That's what he said. That's what he saw. That's what the angel told him. So these are demonic strongholds that Satan is the ruler of. That's where all the trouble comes from. Now, what can you do about it? Because you say, well, Pastor Caldwell, I'm just little old me. I'm just a church member. I blah, blah, blah. Listen, he says, take unto you the whole armor of God. Now, I'm not talking about a ritual of putting on the armor, make believe. I'm talking about getting a revelation of being protected by the armor of God. Why? That you may be able to withstand in the evil day. And we're in the evil day now, in case you hadn't noticed. He said, stand against in the evil day, and having done all to stand, stand therefore, having your loins girded about with truth. That's significant of the girdle that the priests wore. Having on the breastplate of righteousness, your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace, and above all, did you get it? Above all, above everything, take the shield of faith, wherewith you shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. Now, there's a difference between schemes of the devil and fiery darts. Schemes are back, behind your back. There's a lot of that going on. But fiery darts are a direct assault. Take the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints. That's the first order of defense, is praying, taking authority, pleading the blood. I did a whole series one time in our church on pleading the blood. What does that mean? The Old Testament saints, the old Pentecostal saints used to use that phrase, but today most church members don't know what that is or how to do it. Well, that's commentary for today. I hope this has helped you. I'll give you little inserts here and there over the week, but join me tomorrow. We're going to talk about finishing your course. Remember, Jesus is Lord of Arkansas and wherever you're watching in the world too.
Send your questions, comments, and testimonies to Happy Caldwell at Post Office Box 26207, Little Rock, Arkansas 72221, or email happycaldwell@vtntv.com. Remember to follow VTN on Facebook at VTN Your Arkansas Christian Connection, and follow Happy Caldwell on Twitter at Happy_Caldwell. VTN is on Roku. Search VTN in the channel store and add us to your lineup. Today's episode is available to watch on demand at VTNTV.com and click Watch. You can also watch VTN via live stream at VTNTV.com.